Story number 1. Occupancy count. I was assigned to conduct a follow-up verification at a rural housing complex in eastern Kentucky after 3 separate noise complaints were filed within a 72-hour window, all referencing the same vacant unit. The assignment came through on a Tuesday morning, marked routine with standard documentation protocols. I had been working property verification for the County Housing Authority for 8 years at that point. Most follow-ups involved faulty plumbing or wildlife in the walls. The property manager met me in the parking lot at 13:30. She was cooperative, mentioned the complaints had come from units on either side and one directly above. All 3 residents described rhythmic knocking sounds between 2200 and 0200 hours. She confirmed the unit had been empty for 6 months following a standard lease termination. The previous tenant had left without incident. No maintenance issues logged. No unauthorized entry recorded on the electronic access system. She handed me the keys and said she would be in the office if I needed anything. I told her I would check in before leaving. The unit was on the 2nd floor, middle of the building. Number 214. I unlocked the door at 1400 hours exactly and noted the time in my field log. The interior smelled stale but not unpleasant. No visible damage to walls or fixtures. Carpet showed vacuum lines from the turnover cleaning. Kitchen appliances were standard issue, all functional according to the last inspection report. I walked through the main room and noted conditions in my recorder. Then I saw the door frames. Every interior door in the unit, 4 total, showed identical horizontal scratches at exactly 4 feet 3 inches from the floor. The scratches were thin, evenly spaced, running the full width of each frame. They appeared fresh, no dust in the grooves. I photographed each one and made measurements to confirm the height consistency. The property manager had not mentioned any damage. The turnover report from 6 months prior made no reference to scratches. I added a note to follow up on the timeline. I proceeded with environmental readings, temperature, humidity, air quality, everything within normal range in the main areas. I moved to the rear bedroom and felt the temperature drop immediately upon crossing the threshold. My handheld meter confirmed a 9-degree difference. I checked the HVAC vents. Functional. No blockages. No drafts from the window seals. I documented the anomaly and continued the walkthrough. The closet door in the rear bedroom was closed. I noted that all other closet doors in the unit had been left open. I completed my photographs of the bedroom, then approached the closet. Standard bifold door, builder grade. I placed my hand on the door and felt a faint vibration. I stepped back and waited. The vibration stopped. At 15:20 hours, I heard rhythmic impact sounds originating from inside the closet. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks, pause. The pattern repeated 4 times. I activated my audio recorder and approached the door again. The knocking ceased immediately. I opened the closet door. Empty space, bare walls, wire shelf bracket with no shelf. I examined the walls for hollow points or access panels. Nothing. I knocked on the back wall. Solid. I left the closet door open and returned to my documentation. Protocol required me to contact my supervisor if I encountered evidence of unauthorized access or potential safety hazards. I reached for my radio. Static interference across all channels. I tried my mobile phone. Full signal strength, 5 bars. I attempted to dial the office. The call would not connect. I tried 3 more times with the same result. I sent a text message. It showed as sent, but I received no confirmation. I decided to complete the documentation and exit the premises to make contact from my vehicle. I was returning my equipment to my case when I heard the scratching begin. It came from the interior side of the bedroom door. I was still inside the bedroom. The door was open, positioned 90 degrees to the frame. The scratching sound moved horizontally across the door surface at the same height as the marks on the frames. 4 feet, 3 inches. I could hear it clearly, but I could see nothing making contact with the door. I moved toward the door. The scratching stopped. I waited 30 seconds. Silence. I stepped back toward the closet. The scratching resumed, faster this time, moving back and forth across the door in rapid strokes. I could see the door vibrating slightly with each pass. I activated my camera and filmed the door for 20 seconds. The scratching continued throughout the recording, but no source was visible in the frame. I made the decision to evacuate. I moved quickly to the bedroom door and passed through into the main room. The apartment was silent. I proceeded to the exit, secured my equipment case, and left the unit. I locked the door behind me and walked directly to my vehicle without stopping at the office. Once in my vehicle, I drove 300 yards to the far end of the parking lot. My phone connected immediately. I reached my supervisor at 15:52 hours and provided a verbal summary. She instructed me to file an initial report and return to the office. She said someone would follow up with the property manager. I completed my report in the vehicle and submitted it through the secure portal at 16:20 hours. I included all photographs, audio recordings, and video documentation. I noted the communication interference and the temperature anomaly. I described the scratching sounds and the marks on the door frames. I did not speculate on cause. The following morning, I received notification that the unit had been reclassified for administrative hold pending structural review. I was reassigned to standard rotations in a different service zone, effective immediately. The case file was transferred to a regional assessment team I had not worked with before. 2 weeks later, I saw a brief note in the internal system indicating the property manager had been instructed to remove Unit 214 from available inventory without explanation. No further complaints were filed for that address. The structural review was listed as complete, with no findings requiring disclosure. I was told the documentation I submitted had been archived under restricted access. I have not been assigned to that property again. Story number 2. Drainage Survey. I arrived at the abandoned Lowell Textile Mill site at 9:30 in the morning to conduct a standard pre-demolition asbestos and lead paint assessment before the scheduled teardown in 6 weeks. The contract was straightforward. The building had been flagged for environmental hazards typical of industrial structures from that era, and my role was to quantify exposure risk for the demolition crew. The mill had been closed since 1998, and my initial walkthrough of the ground floor showed expected decay, water damage, broken windows, graffiti, and standard biological contamination from birds and rodents. I documented structural integrity issues in the southwest loading bay, where ceiling joists had rotted through. The air smelled of mildew and pigeon waste. I marked 6 locations for sampling and proceeded to the second floor via the main stairwell, which remains stable. I began air sampling in the northeast corner of the second floor when I noticed that my particulate counter was registering rhythmic fluctuations every 11 seconds despite no visible air movement or machinery. The pattern was precise. I observed it for 4 minutes while standing completely still. The counter would spike to 270 particles per cubic meter, hold for 3 seconds, then drop to 41 particles per cubic meter. I checked the calibration date on the unit. It had been serviced 8 days prior. I moved to the third floor to establish a comparison baseline and found that all 3 of my meters showed identical 11-second cycles, which violated basic instrument independence and suggested equipment failure. The particulate counter, the volatile organic compound detector, and the carbon monoxide meter all peaked and dropped in perfect synchronization. I had never seen correlated failure across different sensor types. I made a note to request replacement units and continued sampling from the planned grid points. While replacing batteries in the main unit, I heard what sounded like a full shift of textile looms operating somewhere below me, a sound that stopped completely when I returned to the stairwell. The sound had been clear enough that I could distinguish individual machine rhythms. the kind of layered mechanical noise that comes from dozens of separate sources running simultaneously. I stood in the stairwell for 3 minutes. Silence. I returned to my equipment. The sound did not resume. I descended to the second floor and observed that dust on the floor showed recent disturbance patterns consistent with heavy machinery operation, though the space had been empty of equipment for 26 years. The patterns were not footprints. They were long parallel marks, evenly spaced, approximately 7 feet apart, running the full length of the production floor. I photographed them with my phone and took surface samples from 3 locations. The dust itself was consistent with the age of the building: settled particulate matter, dead insect fragments, degraded insulation fibers. The sound resumed at 1400 hours and did not stop when I approached, allowing me to confirm that no physical source existed while the auditory phenomenon continued for 17 minutes. I walked the entire second floor while the sound persisted. I could locate no machinery, no speakers, no pipes or ventilation systems that might produce or carry the noise. I stood in the center of the production floor and listened. The sound had depth and variation. Individual machines seemed to speed up or slow down independently. At one point, I heard what could have been a human shout, distant, underneath the mechanical layer. I recorded 4 minutes of audio on my phone. When I played it back immediately afterward, the file contained only silence and my own footsteps. I completed contamination sampling in the affected areas, documented meter anomalies and auditory events in my field notes, and exited the structure at 16:15. My samples showed asbestos concentration consistent with buildings of that vintage and lead paint in expected locations. The environmental hazards were present but manageable with standard abatement procedures. I loaded my equipment into the truck and sat in the cab for 10 minutes, reviewing my notes. I filed my toxicity report with standard findings and submitted a separate Form 77J to the regional supervisor, noting instrumentation malfunction and recommending a 2-week delay for equipment recalibration. I did not include the auditory events in the Form 77J. I described only the meter synchronization and the failure of my audio recording equipment. I recommended that the follow-up assessment be conducted by a different contractor using independent instrument sets to verify my findings. The demolition was postponed indefinitely following my report, and the property was transferred to State Historical Review, which reclassified the site as administratively restricted pending further assessment. I was not contacted for clarification or follow-up sampling. 3 weeks later, I received a closure notice indicating that my contract had been fulfilled and that no further action was required from my firm. The payment was processed without adjustment. I saw the property listing change to state ownership in the public records database 5 months later. No historical review documents were ever published. The site remains fenced and posted with no trespassing signs. My field notes and photographs are stored in my personal archive, separate from company files, marked for administrative retention only. Story number 3. Flight Manifest. I arrived at Billings Logan International Airport on a Tuesday morning in late September to conduct a routine security protocol review following a minor breach report filed 3 days prior. The assignment came through standard channels. I had handled similar reviews in Missoula and Great Falls without incident. This was expected to take no more than 2 days. The breach involved a passenger who had bypassed the metal detector by walking through an unmarked door that airport staff insisted had been locked and alarmed for over 2 years. The passenger, a woman traveling to Denver, claimed she had simply followed signs to her gate. Security footage showed her approaching the door, opening it without hesitation, and continuing through to the concourse. No alarm sounded. The door closed behind her. She boarded her flight. Airport management filed the report as a procedural formality. During my walkthrough of the secure area, I noticed the door in question. Terminal B, Gate 7 maintenance access. It was painted the same industrial beige as the surrounding wall. The signage above it read "Authorized personnel only" in faded letters. What caught my attention was the handle. It had no dust on it despite the claimed disuse. The metal showed wear consistent with regular contact. I made a note and continued the inspection. When I requested keycard logs from airport security, the system showed the door had been accessed 47 times in the past 6 months, or between 2 and 4 in the morning. The security supervisor, a man named Garrett who had worked at the airport for 16 years, stared at the screen for a long time before saying, "That couldn't be right." He explained that the door led to a decommissioned stairwell. The lower level had been sealed off when they expanded the baggage system in 2006. No keycards were issued for that access point. I asked if maintenance staff might have used it. He said maintenance didn't work those hours. I reviewed overnight surveillance footage and observed the door opening on its own at 3:17 each morning, remaining open for exactly 9 minutes with no visible person entering or exiting. The footage was clear. The door would swing inward smoothly, stay open, then close again. The motion was consistent across every recording I examined. I watched 12 nights of footage. 3:17, 9 minutes, no variation. Garrett suggested a mechanical fault, a failed latch combined with air pressure changes. I considered this but noted that the door opened inward against the pressurized concourse. He had no response. On my third night of observation, I positioned myself near the door and watched it open at the expected time, revealing a stairwell that descended far deeper than the building's blueprints indicated possible. I had reviewed the architectural plans that afternoon. The airport was built on a concrete slab foundation. There was a shallow utility crawl space beneath the terminal, no more than 4 feet of clearance. The stairwell I was looking at dropped at a steep angle into darkness well beyond that depth. The air that came through the doorway was cold and smelled faintly of concrete dust and something else I couldn't identify. Metallic, but not quite. I stood there for approximately 2 minutes, checking my watch, my flashlight, my radio. Everything functioned normally. I made the decision to descend. I descended 4 flights before my radio lost signal and my flashlight began to dim despite fresh batteries, at which point I heard footsteps ascending toward me from below. The steps were regular, unhurried. I stopped moving and listened. The footsteps continued. I could not tell how far away they were. The acoustics in the stairwell made it difficult to judge distance. I called out to identify myself. The footsteps did not change pace or stop. I retreated to ground level and sealed the door with an unauthorized master lock, filing my report under Infrastructure Anomaly Code 7 Gray rather than security breach. I did not include the full details of my descent in the official documentation. I noted structural concerns, unauthorized access patterns, and recommended immediate closure pending further investigation. I used language that would flag the report for specialized review without triggering a broader inquiry. The airport received federal funding to renovate Terminal B 3 weeks later, and the door was removed entirely during construction. I was not involved in the renovation planning. I received a brief email from a regional coordinator thanking me for identifying the infrastructure issue. The email included a reference number I did not recognize, and a note that all related materials had been transferred to a different filing system. I returned to the airport in November for an unrelated inspection. Terminal B had been partially rebuilt. The wall where the door had been was now occupied by a coffee shop. I asked the construction supervisor if they had encountered anything unusual when they removed the stairwell. He said there was no stairwell, just wall cavity and old wiring. I did not press the issue. I was reassigned to desk review in Helena and instructed to classify all related documentation under permanent administrative seal. The instruction came through a written memo, not email. I signed the acknowledgement form and forwarded my files to the designated archive. I have not returned to Billings Logan International Airport. My current assignment involves reviewing incident reports and preparing summary documentation for quarterly audits. The work is thorough and unremarkable.